do to make people vote more, and especially to encourage women to run, because the feeling, I think, is that, especially after this week, we need more women everywhere running things. I think everybody can pretty much agree on that. Our panelists today are Director of We're the People. It's an LA-based organization. She'll tell you more about her organization very shortly. And Christina Reynolds, who's the Vice President of Communications for Emily's List. So we are calling her the Communications Director for the day. Side of the Amphitheater, there's some really terrific fan art and, fan tchotchkes, things that we all need. Christmas is coming. So, go ahead and visit them and support them if you can, because they came, someone came all the way from Arkansas to bring her stuff here, so we want to encourage that. And with that, I'm going to ask each of the ladies up here to introduce themselves, to talk about their organization, and then we'll ask some questions and give you guys a chance to ask some questions as well.
Money, and then Emily's List came in. Emily stands for Early Money is Like Yeast, because it makes the dough rise. So we started as a fundraising organization. We are now 5 million members strong. We have elected almost 1,000 women from state and local races all the way up, well, not quite all the way up, but all the way up to Senate and governor. This including, nearly every woman who currently serves in Congress, a large number of the governors, although we haven't had enough female governors. This cycle, we've sort of blown everything out. We have trained 5,000 women. In our entire history up until this cycle, we had trained 9,000 women, so you can see the explosion of what's happened this year. We also have had, in the 2016 cycle, and typically, I know we're going to talk about how more women should run. Typically, women have to be asked to run. Our president, Stephanie Shryock, literally had to sit at a table with Elizabeth Warren, a very qualified woman, and say, no, you can do this. You should be a senator. You can run, and had to convince her to run. So typically, we've had to recruit women. We've had to sort of beg them to run, because it's hard. And women face a lot of challenges that men don't when they run. This cycle was a little different, and what happened was, in the 2016 cycle, 920 women reached out to us saying, hi, I think I'd like to run for office at some point, can you help me? That was a record. They called it the Hillary bump.
Just a quick question, was it influenced by the Women's March? Because I know that during the Women's March...
a lot of things. So what happened was, in the first month after the election, so even before the Women's March, just people woke up. I will tell you, I worked for Hillary, so I was crawling under my covers. The women at Emily's List were, trying to figure out what's next. And in that first month, even before the march, 1,000 women reached out, which is incredible, broke the entire 2-year period's record, right? And then after that, we had things like the Women's March. Emily's List was a sponsor of the Women's March. We worked with them. We did a training the day after, partnering with them, where 500 women showed up, and we had a wait list equally as long. We just couldn't fit them in the room. And that has just continued to grow to the point where we've gone from a record of 920 to, as of this morning, 42,050. So with that growth, I'm glad to see, because we say those numbers so much that they become a little like, oh yeah, 42,000. When you stop and think about it, that kind of growth is nuts. And we're seeing it in races around the country where we have record numbers of women running in everything. We have record numbers of women winning their primaries, which is pretty awesome. We like to think we help, but that's pretty great. And it's just something that we've never seen before. And I think it's that women sort of took a look at the last election, and instead of crawling under their covers like I did, they said, all right, I'm going to go to work, right? I'm going to fix it. It is so inspiring, and our candidates are different than we've ever seen before. They're first-time candidates. They have a wide variety of experience. They're not the typical, first you run for city council, then you run for this, then you run for that. They are coming out of the woodwork, and they're doing the work, and so they're raising money like we've never seen before, small dollar donations. You hear a lot, and we love him, and I hope he wins, about Beto O'Rourke, but I can tell you that's happening in House races around the country, even without that kind of attention. And it's amazing. I mean, one of my favorite examples, Sharice Davids is a Native American woman. We have never elected a Native American woman to the House as a country, ever. We've elected Native American men, not enough, but we've never elected a Native American woman. Sharice Davids is running in Kansas 3. Kansas, not exactly a bastion of liberal values, right? She is running in Kansas. She's a lesbian. Also not something you might think of in the Midwest necessarily, but goodness knows that is changing. She's Native American. She's an MMA fighter. She's also a lawyer. She's awesome. Go look her up, watch her video. She's awesome. And I've met her, and she's about this tall. I'm like, how do you throw people around? She's a badass. Sharice has raised $700,000 in the first, I think, like month and a half after her primary. Small dollar. All like just people who, she got out, she did the work, people saw her, they liked her, she's knocking doors, and she turned that seat in Kansas into a toss-up by the virtue of the strength of her campaign. That's what we're seeing around the country, and it's really inspiring, and it's happening because of women. So
That is film out tomorrow. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So about 5 years ago, does anybody here know who Wendy Davis is? I'm sure are very aware. If you don't, Wendy was a state senator in Texas who had a 13-hour filibuster. She spoke for 11 and then for 2 hours. There was chaos. It was amazing, and I heard about it through Twitter because nobody was showing it online. Even MSNBC didn't have, nobody had it. But over 100,000 people were tuning into YouTube to watch a state senator in Texas filibuster. It was amazing, it was a moment. And the next day I woke up and was like, I gotta do something, this woman's incredible. She announced her run for governor in October, and something compelled me to say, I have to be a part of this, it's magic, whatever it is. And so I started doing a documentary about her. I just wanted to go out and kind of be a part of it all. She lost her race, and I thought maybe the movie was kind of over. And then once Hillary started running, I thought maybe in this movie there's a loss and then probably a win. Spoiler alert. So I made a documentary about these two races and looking at politics and getting involved and voting through the lens of Wendy's race in Texas and the larger lens of our 2016 presidential election, and mostly just kind of my journey through understanding what made me want to get involved, and through that understanding hoping that I can encourage others to get involved. So I would encourage you guys to come check it out. There are Lego minifigures in it, and dinosaurs, if that, and me. But really, come for the Lego. It's cool.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Had you watched The West Wing?
Absolutely, yes.
Did that inspire you to,
Yes,
get
definitely.
involved?
I watched The West Wing when it was on television, and then throughout the process of making the movie, it was a 5-year journey, and a lot of times I thought, one, I'm not going to finish this movie, and two, I don't want to finish this movie, especially after 2 really hard losses. When Wendy lost, it felt, and our organization is nonpartisan, so this isn't me speaking on behalf of the organization, but just for me personally, when Wendy lost, it felt the same as when Hillary lost, and that's what I found in the West Wing.
That's terrific.
I'll tell you, there was something that, as a researcher in the DNC working on policy issues in 1999 and 2000, the thing that we loved the best about the West Wing, I mean, it was nice, it's like, oh, Democrats winning, yay. And during, after the Supreme Court handed the election over and
they kept trying to explain. I'll just give a little bit of background of why I'm interested, or basically I've enjoyed watching The West Wing, and then my husband at the time was I'm the good woman candidate.
Well, my main question, I work in the government, so naturally we're restricted by the Hatch Act. So there's a lot of things we can't do. But given that, people like what kind of people in my position do? I mean, that being is in, if there's a lot of things we can't run for office.
Right. fundraisers,
Yeah,
right?
candles,
Yeah,
fundraisers, you know.
Yeah, I know that's a good thing too.
yeah. I will say, having had stuff thrown at me, the beeping and the thumbs up are much better. Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. I think I will say
have led for a power sharing agreement in one of our houses in the
Absolutely.
legislature, because going into it, there was a Republican supermajority.
Yep.
So they went from a supermajority to one vote, and if that one vote, that flip had gone the other way, then Republicans would no longer be in sole control of that
Yep.
chamber. It was such a critical seat. It was devastating. when
Yeah.
it lost.
I mean, we talk about this for Hillary, you know, literally 80,000 votes in certain states would have flipped the election, right? But this is a case, I mean, you're exactly right. It literally, they would have been tied. It would have meant shared control of the committees and of all sorts of things. And so part of it is convincing your friends. Shelley Simons is her name. Go look her up. Use her as an example if you need to. That, I think, is one of the biggest things we can do, and get them engaged now to make sure that they're registered. Some states are really bad about this.
Yeah, I agree that getting your friends registered to vote, you are politically involved. You probably have a lot of friends that are. Do it. And yeah, make sure you're registered to vote. People are dropping off rolls without knowing. Sometimes it's because you missed an election. Sometimes it's because there are errors that drop people off rolls. So if you voted in every single election, fantastic. You have to make sure you're registered still, because you don't know. It could have, we're seeing it all over in LA right now. A ton of people that have registered or that voted in every single election have checked and found out that they're off the rolls. So definitely make sure.
I'm not sure what the actual rules are, but I know in Massachusetts, because I've also worked as a poll checker, you can.
I know that because I work with a couple Portuguese American women who are very happy about it.
That's
so,
great. Great. Yep.
Does Emily's List as an organization support all women candidates of any party?
No, we were created to help Democratic pro-choice.
Senate race is not close. My district is not close. But there are so many races across the country. So if I want to donate money, is there anywhere where I can donate where they can help decide where to direct it? Because I mean, you can't.
Liz Watson, 9th District of Indiana.
And Emily's List candidate. We love Liz. So I think you have to direct it to a candidate. Now, there are different funds. So
I'd just like to caution folks to be careful if you're using Act Blue. They have been known to accept your one-time donation as a recurring monthly donation. So be careful with that.
Yeah, sometimes you have to double check, make
Yeah.
sure things aren't checked off as an automatic
Yeah.
thing. But
The time to find out how to contribute directly to your favorite candidate's campaign and write them a check and mail it to them, that works.
there's nothing wrong with old school. Seriously. Yep.
So one, I just have like a little pro tip. There's an app called ResistBot. I don't know if you guys familiar with it. ResistBot. It helps you write to your congresspeople. But one of the things that it started doing is it'll check to see if you're registered, and then it will offer to check once a month and let you know.
awesome.
Wow, that's
really cool.
Yeah, and so it'll just like send you like a little message, either text or something like that, and just being like, okay, you're still registered. And then I do have a question. So you were talking about with Emily's List how a lot of times you have to go and you have to seek out a candidate, and you have to ask them and tell them that they can do it. So what does that look like? What kind of person are you looking for, and how do you find them?
It's a good question, and I will say it's happened a lot. Like this cycle, they're coming to us, which is a wonderful thing. What we look for is a person who.
18, they know this is, like just like you needed to register for selective service or whatever it's called, so that you can submit a FAFSA for college. Do they know that at 18 this is what's expected of us?
Not so much. Not really. I've been out of high school for a little while, but I took a civics class that I was vaguely interested in. And
Voting for the kids, they vote on their favorite character or the name of a fish or whatever. We have a little ballot box, so they get the idea.
So before we moved, we were at a magnet school that was always under siege. And so our kids got really used to going to city council meetings. And so they were present for those and watching the process. And so I would just encourage mothers to take their children to school board meetings, to city council meetings, so they can see on a micro level, because sometimes the macro level is too daunting, especially at that age. But then they can see how the micro affects the macro. So.
Yeah,
That's also
and
good
you've
too,
had your hand up a while.
Ignore that level of engagement in the country on, and that's important. Like, your school board is important. That impacts your day-to-day life. You have kids a lot more than, who has that seat in the House of Representatives in DC.
Absolutely.
So I'm a 10th grade teacher, so I work with, we have a veterans club and I have a lot of really engaged young women, but they're 15, so they can't register to vote and they don't have money because they're 15. So how could a minor that is a teenager become involved in politics if they really want to be?
I would imagine they can volunteer. If that's just going to the whatever office is, for whatever is running, they would be welcome, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think volunteering. I mean, to the point about school board, and I will say we don't endorse the school boards. We have tripled the size of our state and local team, and endorsed. We're at 520, I think, right now. Women running for state legislature around the country because brownies matter.
Go ahead. 2 more questions, but go ahead.
Do you vet your candidates?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was about to say, that when you find out all this stuff that's coming up, that you find out about, tax and all that kind of stuff, that you vet your...
We vet them. Here's family members with opioid struggles. This is something every single family in America deals with, and to imagine that it's not is unrealistic. And I think it actually makes them more human, or at least we recognize their humanity a little better. One last question. Yep.
Yeah, before mentioning, talking about the people that your vote counts, and I've been having a conversation with some people, and ADHD boy hasn't done the research, so but you three would know if my response is accurate. When people talk about, what is that? Look at Bush and Gore in 2000, and Kerry and Bush in 2004, and look at 2016, Hillary won by 3.5 million votes, and still we have Trump, et cetera. So what is the Republicans do gerrymandering, and they bump people off the road, they stop people from voting, et cetera. So what's the point? And my response has been, how the hell did Barack Obama become president?
That's right.
Because I don't believe that the Republicans sat back in 2008 and said, Democrat, liberal, black guy, we'll sit this one out.
That's right.
Because you want my
Yeah. And I would add, we talked about Virginia, we talked about that one vote and what a difference it could have made, but here's the reality. Even with not having gotten that shared control, Virginia expanded Medicaid this year because of all of those people that got elected.
So your vote matters. That's the takeaway from all of this. Yes. Thank you guys all so much for coming and being such great participants in this, and thank you both. That you've been, that's really great.